Hi everyone, Dr. Sadaf Qureshi here. Today we are going to talk about cranial cavity. Cranial cavity is composed of three parts: anterior cranial cavity or anterior cranial fossa, middle cranial cavity or fossa, and posterior cranial cavity or fossa. Anterior cranial cavity is separated from the middle cranial cavity by the lesser wing of sphenoid, and the middle cranial cavity is separated from the posterior cranial cavity by the petrous part of temporal bone. So lesser wing of sphenoid separates anterior cranial cavity and middle cranial cavity, and petrous part of temporal bone separates the middle cranial cavity and posterior cranial cavity. We will start our topic with anterior cranial cavity or anterior cranial fossa. Talking about the location and function of anterior cranial cavity, it is located in the frontal part of skull. As the name indicates, anterior, that means in front. It provides a supportive base for the frontal lobes of brain. This fossa is involved in separating the brain from the underlying structures such as nasal cavity and orbits through its bony floor. This highlighted area in the diagram is anterior cranial cavity. Now we will talk about which bones are contributing in formation of anterior cranial cavity. The bones contributing are ethmoid bone, sphenoid bone, and the frontal bone. So these three bones contribute to the formation of anterior cranial cavity. Now we will talk about the boundaries of anterior cranial cavity. Boundaries of anterior cranial cavity are anteriorly by inner surface of frontal bone. Medially, the anterior cranial cavity is bounded by ethmoid bone, and posteriorly it is bounded by sharp lesser wing of sphenoid bone, and median part of posterior boundary is by optic chiasma. Now we'll talk about floor of anterior cranial fossa. Floor of anterior cranial fossa is formed by orbital players of frontal bone at the lateral portion, and in the medial portion it is formed by cerebriform plate of ethmoid bone or cerebriform plate of ethmoid bone. Posteriorly, there is lesser wing of sphenoid that form the little posterior part of floor of anterior cranial fossa. The floor appear irregular due to impression of sulci and gyri of the frontal lobe that is present in the anterior cranial fossa. Now we will talk about some of the important features of the anterior cranial fossa, and here we will just enumerate these important features. For the detailed video, you can see our video about anterior cranial fossa, that will be made a separate video about it. So in this video, we will just enumerate the important features of anterior cranial fossa. The anterior cranial fossa important features are frontal crest, then we have crista galli, then we have cribriform plate of ethmoid bone, then we have jugum sphenoidale, then we have foramen cecum, then we have anterior ethmoidal foramen, middle ethmoidal foramen, and posterior ethmoidal foramen. For detail of all these structures, you can see our video that is exclusively on anterior cranial fossa. Now we will talk about middle cranial fossa or middle cranial cavity. This part in the cranial cavity, the colored part, is middle cranial fossa. It is separated from anterior cranial fossa by the lesser wing of sphenoid and posterior cranial fossa by petrous part of temporal bone. The middle cranial fossa consists of small median part, as you can see in the diagram, and expanded lateral part, and that's the reason it is called as a bear-shaped structure, a butterfly-shaped structure or area. The median raised part is formed by the body of sphenoid, and the expanded lateral part of the middle cranial fossa are formed by temporal lobes of are formed by greater wing of sphenoid bone and temporal bone parts. It lodges the temporal lobes of cerebral hemisphere. Now we'll talk about the boundaries of middle cranial fossa. Anteriorly, it is bounded by lesser wing of sphenoid. Laterally, it is bounded by squamous part of temporal bone, the greater wing of sphenoid, and the parietal bone. And posteriorly, it is bounded by petrous part of temporal bone. Now we will talk about the floor of middle cranial fossa. Floor of middle cranial fossa is formed by greater wing of sphenoid. Anteriorly, posteriorly, it is formed by petrous part of temporal bone and the squamous part of temporal bone. So now we will talk about the features of middle cranial fossa, and as we said earlier, we will just enumerate important features. For further details, you can see our exclusive video that is on the middle cranial fossa. So there we have is arcuate eminence, sphenoparietal venous sinus, groove for the greater petrosal nerve, groove for the lesser petrosal nerve, impression for trigeminal ganglion, cavernous sinus, space. Tegment tympani, anterior clinoid process. We can see some of the canals in the middle cranial fossa, as it is very important structure area for the canals or foramens. The first canal or foramen is optic canal. The second is superior orbital fissure. Third is foramen rotundum. Then we can see there foramen ovale and foramen spinosum, and we can also see foramen lasinum in the middle cranial fossa and carotid canal. For detailed video, you can visit the special video or exclusive video for the middle cranial fossa. And we have some other features that are in the middle part of the middle cranial fossa. There are sulcus chiasmata. Then we have posterior tuberculum cilia. Then we have middle clinoid process, sella turcica, and we can appreciate their dorsum cilia and posterior clinoid process. So this was all about the middle cranial cavity or middle cranial fossa. Now we will move to the posterior cranial fossa. This colored part in the cranial cavity is the posterior cranial fossa, as it is located at the back side of the skull or back side of the cavity. That's the reason it is called as posterior cranial fossa. Posterior cranial fossa is deep and lodges the parts of hindbrains, namely the cerebellum, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Bones contributing to the posterior cranial fossa are posterior part of the body of sphenoid bone. Petrous part of temporal bone also contribute to posterior cranial fossa. Then we have mastoid angle of parietal bone, and then we have occipital bone squamous part. These four bones contribute to the formation of posterior cranial fossa. Then we will talk about the boundaries. Anteriorly, it is bounded by dorsum stelli and posterior borders of petrous part of temporal bone. Posteriorly, it is bounded by squamous part of occipital bone, and laterally it is bounded by mastoid angle of parietal bone, posterior surface of petrous temporal bone, mastoid process of temporal bone, and squamous part of occipital bone. Now we will talk about the floor of the posterior cranial fossa. It is by mastoid part of temporal bone, parts of temporal bone that are condylar part, basilar part, and squamous part of temporal bone. Occipital bone, parts of occipital bone. The green bone in the diagram is occipital bone. Now we will talk about the roof of fossa. The roof of fossa is formed by a fold of dura mater, that is tentorium cerebelli, which intervenes between the cerebellum below and the occipital lobes of cerebral hemisphere above. So it is between the cerebral hemisphere, occipital lobes, and cerebellum. Then we will talk about the foramens in posterior cranial fossa. These are internal equistic meatus, jugular foramen, foramen magnum, posterior condylar canal, and then we have some of the features that are internal occipital protuberance, internal occipital crest, and we can appreciate clevis here, and the fissure, that is petro-occipital fissure, can be also be appreciated, that is between the petrous part of temporal bone and occipital bone. Then we can also appreciate occipital condyle here and vermian fossa, that is for the vermis. Then we can appreciate groove for sigmoid sinus and groove for transverse sinus. So this was all about the cranial cavity. We evaluated all the important features of the cranial cavity, and we give the overall review of the cranial cavity. If you want a detailed video or exclusive video for anterior cranial cavity, middle cranial cavity, or posterior cranial cavity, or the openings in cranial cavity with the structure passing, what are the structure passing through it, all of the details, you can visit our channel and watch those videos. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Thank you so much.